The story began when someone was notified that he was dead, and his survival duration was 34 seconds. At the same time, the protagonist tried hard to push himself forward. His body trembled badly as he pushed himself forward. He wondered how somebody could die in a hellish place like this. When he reached the floor, he coughed, lay on the ground, and took deep breaths. At the same time, he cursed that hellish place because he was repeatedly notified of his death. However, now his survival duration had increased to 12 minutes and 7 seconds. He was annoyed because he kept dying repeatedly and waking up again in that hell. Grabbing the stick in his hand while still coughing, he enthusiastically took the stick in his hand, stood up, and wondered how many times he would die. Then he stepped forward, looking around, and said, "I don't know what's waiting for me at the end." Suddenly, he heard a strange noise on the other side. He ran away from the danger to save himself, muttering, "I don't have much time." Soon he found shelter on the other side. But just as he caught his breath, a goblin rushed toward him ferociously. Meanwhile, he was notified again of his death, and his total survival duration increased to 7 hours, 42 minutes, and 8 seconds. He didn't like the fact that he had to experience a painful death over and over again. Each time he was crushed, sliced, or torn apart by the monsters, it left him more frustrated. Every time he revived, he was forced to face the same horrors. Confronting the goblin now, he found it gruesome and terrifying. He wondered, what kind of person would willingly jump headfirst into this hell? The goblin rushed toward him with a sharp sword. It lifted the weapon high and slashed at his neck. He fell to the ground, blood oozing from the severe wound. At that moment, he was once again notified that he had died. This time, it pissed him off even more. He thought bitterly, "For a crazy person like me, this is just endless torture." As he lay there, his mind drifted back to the past. He remembered the day when dungeons began to open all over the world. At the same time, people started awakening to mysterious powers, and the world entered a new chaotic era. But a zero-star powerless person has no chance of developing any abilities after that. Some workers work in a sewer line, and he says that was the verdict he was given. One worker was bending, digging, and trying to find something, but then he got up and his hands were full of sewer dirt. He looked at it and said it was gathering residual magical powers to barely scrape. But when he found nothing, he said today was a wasted day. That was the life one lived in the sewers. After some time, he noticed something over the wall, which diverted his attention. So he moved toward it and tried to approach it. Meanwhile, the workers behind him observed the whole situation. He tried hard to take it, but failed and dropped into the sewer water. His companions moved toward him and rescued him. He replied that he was fine. His companions removed the mask from her face, adjusted her glasses with worry, and said he didn't need to push himself too hard. She was the college research assistant, Yin. Then he stood up and knew there was no way for him to escape this useless life. The other worker asked him why he was trying to get up there. He removed his mask and gave them a fake smile by putting his hand on his head. He was the crystal moss collector, Kang Humu. On the other side, he heard the news that the anchor informed him that today, the Sung clan, led by Lee Jitty, had succeeded in raiding the 5-star dungeons of T. This is the 3rd time in the world that a 5-star dungeon has been raided. Lee Jitty affirmed her words. The news anchor says that regarding the success of his expedition, leader Legitty has noted that this was the result of all of his clan hunter efforts. At the same time, he was sitting before the TV, holding the necklace in his hand. He remembered that somebody called him from behind and introduced himself while adjusting his glasses, saying that he was Robert Lee, a lawyer. Firstly, he says that he must pray that his parents rest in peace, which makes him so confused. But Robert Lee informed him that he had come to give him what his father left for him. Robert Lee gave him a stone that shines bright. On the other side, Lee Jitty gave his interview and said he was glad about this raid because they had shown Korea's true powers. After hearing his words, the protagonist looked at him angrily and said he wanted to get ahead and stand where he was. Meanwhile, he made a fist and said he wanted to see how far he could reach his hands. When he puts the stone in his fist, he is surprised to see the energy emerging from it is so tremendous that it is hard to hold back. But he tries his best and grits his teeth. Shortly, he was welcomed as he entered the unknown place, and he worriedly looked around, wondering where he was. Then he feels strange because poison spreads in his body and blood spits out from his mouth. So he grabs himself to overcome this situation. He fell to the ground by attack. After some time, he was notified that he was in a problematic hell. He was informed again that he was entering the Star of the Apocalypse, where most of the monsters rushed toward him and punched him in his abdomen badly. Due to him falling away and blood oozing out from his mouth at that moment, he thought that he had died. Meanwhile, he was notified that he had died, and his survival duration was 5 days, 8 hours, 4 minutes, and 16 seconds, which was more than before. He was fed up with this situation, so he slammed the stick badly on the ground and shouted at them to stop. Suddenly, he rushed toward the goblin, fought with him, and dodged his attack. During the fight, his hand was cut down because of the goblin's attack, and he is wondering and thinking that he died and survived only to die again. After seeing this, the goblin laughs at him, but simultaneously he notices something. The goblin wonders because the protagonist holds the stick in his other hand. When he attacked the goblin's eye with his stick, he said while he clenched his teeth that if he were to phrase it another way, it wouldn't mean he could never die. Then the protagonist stabs his chest with his stick. The goblin screamed badly with pain and died there in agony. After some time, the protagonist sits on his knees exhaustively after killing the goblin. Meanwhile, he was notified that he had died, and his survival duration was 12 days, 6 hours, 58 minutes, and 4 seconds. With time, his survival duration increased as soon as he killed the opponents. On the other side, he grabbed the small dagger, attacked the zombies, and cut their necks angrily. After some time, most of the monsters moved forward and approached him. They all were in full rage and attacked him badly with their claws. Then he cursed at the Apocalypse Star while gritting his teeth. They all looked terrifying. They were all around the protagonist. Only the arm of the protagonist was visible, but he didn't go down. Suddenly, he kicked one of them badly, and with his kick, that monster fell away. Then the protagonist screams severely and starts to bite them. He took a chunk from his back, and then he began to squeeze their eyes with his thumbs, and some died with his kicks. When he squeezes his eyes, he says it doesn't matter whether it is hell or the Apocalypse Star. He should fight them all and improve his survival duration. After that, he was notified that the quest had been completed, and his current survival duration was 36 days and 3 seconds. He stands before the monsters' corpses and takes a deep breath after fighting with them. After some time, he was notified that the shattering star G, the starving star Yalom, and the whispering star Manil were watching him, and even the star that chatters along so loudly. The protagonist huffed badly and looked terrible. Then he smiled while moving forward and saying menacingly that he would crush them all.